The Subcommittee on State Foreign Operations and related programs will come to an order. Actually, before we begin the formal hearing process, I want to take a moment to welcome and to thank our full committee chairman, Mr. Tom Cole. All of us know he's a tremendous leader who really understands the details and cares deeply about the issues in the state and foreign operations bill. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership and thank you for spending this time with us this morning. Mr. Secretary, good morning. Welcome back to the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee. We appreciate you being here today to discuss the fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of State. Let me also thank you for your service, your willingness to serve our country, as well as the men and women of the department who are so often unsung heroes, but we appreciate their service as well. Now, Mr. Secretary, I was really prepared to discuss the specifics of the budget request today, but I'm so deeply concerned by, frankly, the dangerous policies being pursued by this administration. Don't take my word for it. Look around, the world is up in flames. But most notably, I want to focus towards Israel. In this critical moment in history, I'm so concerned that I frankly just scrapped all the work that we had done preparing for this hearing. Instead, I'm going to use my time during the statement to focus on this alone. This administration is playing a very dangerous game with Israel's security and, by extension, frankly, our own national security. So here's what we know. The Biden administration is withholding certain weapons to Israel in its time of greatest need, as it faces a threat to its very existence as a nation state. We also know that apparently that wasn't enough, because the president said during an interview with CNN that he will withhold all offensive weapons to Israel if they go after Hamas in Rafah, which is frankly stunning. And just that one moment, the president made it harder for our hostages, which include Americans, to be freed. He emboldened Hamas, Hezbollah, and the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, Iran. And let's be honest, he gave a green light to the International Criminal Court. That one statement was likely viewed around the world as a defining moment, creating even greater doubt about the strength and the reliability of the United States as a security partner. Communist China and Russia must have been overjoyed by the president's pronouncements. You know, I'm sure that it will be included in their talking points. It'll be now in their talking points when they're trying to woo foreign leaders to come to their corners. Despite the administration's grand rhetoric about countering malign influence of China and other adversaries, frankly, their policies are doing the exact opposite. Of course, this is not in isolation. After the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, there is example after example of this administration, frankly, treating allies like enemies and enemies like allies. Condemn your partners, even publicly, and pressure them for any number of issues where maybe they think that it's, I don't know, keeping the high ground or maybe politically expedient, and then turn around and appease the enemies of the United States, even the most brutal dictatorships. It's hard to imagine a more damaging foreign policy to the national security interests of the United States. Mr. Secretary, I've heard you say that Hamas embeds itself with civilians within hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, and refugee camps. You have also said it is Hamas's responsibility to stop those practices in order to avoid harming civilians, and that the war could be over if Hamas would lay down its arms, surrender the leaders who are responsible for the slaughter and the torture and the murder and the rapes of October 7th. And you have, on occasion, noted the lack of other voices making those same claims among the vocal protesters against Israel. And Mr. Secretary, you're absolutely right. But it's truly unfortunate that every statement made by officials from this administration does not start with this very premise that I just quoted you saying. How can you ensure the protection of innocent civilians? By Hamas releasing the hostages and surrendering, period. It's just not that difficult. How do you increase pressure on Hamas? not by publicly rebuking and shaming Israel and withholding weapons, not by letting sanctions expire on the terrorist state of Iran, which funds Hamas, not by planning to restart aid to UNRWA, which cannot be untangled from Hamas, not by sending condolences after the death of the butcher of Tehran, when thankfully he will no longer be around to torture and kill and maim innocent Iranians just because they want freedom and human rights. It's pretty simple, Mr. Secretary. We must let Israel do its job and destroy Hamas. We cannot stand between Israel and their fight against terrorism for their own survival. We must do what we say and demonstrate real ironclad commitment to Israel's security. And by doing so, we can begin to reverse this administration's damaging foreign policy disasters, which have emboldened our enemies and weakened the credibility of the United States around the world. I wish it were not the case, but the comments made by former Defense Secretary Robert Gates still hold true today, that Joe Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy issue. We need to do better, Mr. Secretary, before it's too late. I understand you have an incredibly difficult job. As I mentioned at the start, I do have great respect for your service, and by the way, for the fact that we've been able to have frank conversations. But as chairman of this subcommittee, which provides the funding for your department, you need to know how deeply concerned I am about this administration's lack of a strong, cohesive, consistent foreign policy. With that, I now would like to yield to the distinguished ranking member of the subcommittee for her opening remarks.